Please welcome to the stage attorney, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and founder of Venture for America, Andrew Yang.
Nice to see you again. Thanks for being here. Your first question is coming from the audience, and he's right here in front of you.
My name is Doug Lehman, and 10 years ago I became insulin dependent after a kidney transplant. Prior to this, I did not take any prescription drugs. Now I need 7 shots a day, and I'm on 32 pills. The price for these medications has steadily increased over the past 5 years. Recently, the cost increased $500 a month. At 66 years old, I've had to seek other employment to cover the cost. If I was not able to work, I could not get the anti-rejection drugs I need to continue this kidney operation. So, as president, what would you do to reduce the cost of prescription and life-saving prescriptions?
Thank you for the question. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. It's a privilege and honor to address you. Your situation is not yours, and by that what I mean is there are so many other Americans who are in the same boat, where if you talk to seniors in particular, they're being gouged. Notice drug prices never seem to go down. They only seem to go up, only seem to have one direction. And this is a uniquely American problem, unfortunately, because our society has been overrun by corporate special interests, including the drug companies. It makes it so that Medicare can't even negotiate drug prices on behalf of the American people. The drug lobby managed to push that to the side. So I have a 4-point plan to get the drug prices down. But then bigger picture, we have to make it so that when you need the money to survive, that you're not heading back to the workforce, trying to find a job in a workforce that might not welcome you or have a path forward. We need to rewrite the rules of the economy so it actually works for us, the citizens and owners of this country. It doesn't feel like we're the owners anymore. It feels like we're somehow passengers on a ship that we have less control over, but we're still the owners of this democracy. So the way you get the drug prices down, first, you give the government authority to negotiate lower prices. That seems straightforward, seems obvious. Whatever reason, we don't do it. The second thing is you say to drug companies, look, you cannot stick it to Americans at a level different than you're charging other countries. Does it make any sense to you all that they can charge Americans 2, 3, 4 times what they're charging people in other markets? It's because people in other parts of the world have governments that are saying there's no way you're going to charge that for this drug. What they do is they use international reference points and say this is the international standard, so you have to be plus or minus 10, 20% of that international standard. Does that make sense to you all? Yeah, America doesn't do it. America, the drug price gets set by the company, and then we're all stuck with it. So what you do is you say to the drug companies, you have to come within this margin of the international standard, what you are charging other citizens of other countries. Number 3, if they don't go along with that, because you know companies just want to maximize the bottom line. They don't care about our health. They don't care about our well-being. So then you have to hit them where it hurts. You have to say, look, if you do not come within these international guidelines, then we, the government of this country, have the ability to license your drug. And then we have public manufacturing facilities where we can manufacture your drug. That is the giant club. And so if you're a company, you know if you push it too far, if you gouge the American people too much, the government will say, look, you failed the test. We tried to let you keep your costs under control, but you can't do it. So then we're going to take this license, and then we have a public facility to manufacture that drug. Do you think that this plan would get drug prices down? Yes. This is how we get drug prices down. These companies only know one language, and it's dollars and cents, so we got to hit them where it hurts. They've long ago lost their sense of public interest, public good, public health. No. We have a system now where it just rewards the bottom line. Now, the second part of this is that our economy is becoming increasingly punishing and inhuman for people at every demographic. And when I was looking at AARP, they tell me it's not an acronym anymore, but I was going to say that the R is actually in question because half of Americans are never going to be able to retire. Just like you, where they're saying I have to work just in order to survive. And I have no interest in living in a country where I go into a convenience store, a grocery store, and there is an elderly American working just to survive instead of a teenager who used to do that job for beer money. Like, that's the way it... that's the way it ought to be, frankly. I mean, instead of having an American who's never going to retire, is just going to work, and the numbers are staggering. You all know. Half of Americans aren't going to have adequate retirement savings. We're entering an age where being old and poor is going to be the norm in this country. And so we have to change that. And my flagship proposal is the biggest expansion of Social Security that has been proposed in generations. It is the Freedom Dividend, $1,000 a month for every American citizen, starting at age 18 until the day you die. And so then if you need another $12,000 a year, it's coming to you because you're a citizen of this country. You're an owner and shareholder of this country. Now, how many of you own stocks of public companies that issue dividends? Many of you do. Verizon, Microsoft, Coca-Cola. So when these companies reach a certain level of success and maturation, what do? They return money to shareholders. I'm going to suggest to you all that the United States of America is at the exact same point, and that we need to start issuing a dividend to ourselves, the owners and shareholders of this country. And when Coca-Cola and Verizon and Microsoft issue a dividend, everyone says, great job, great management. It's time for us to do the same thing for the American people. $12,000 a year would be a game changer for tens of millions of seniors around the country, and would make it so that some people actually can live up to the R in AARP.
We're going to come back to your dividend program in a second, but I wanted to touch on two quick things first. First, before we leave prescription drug costs, you didn't mention reimportation from other countries. Do you think that would work? Is that part of your plan, or is that a bad idea?
That's a good idea. So reimportation is that if American drug manufacturers can't either get their prices in line or produce what the American people need, then we can reimport the drugs from other markets and other producers.
But you want to try those other approaches first?
You know, I think they'd be hand in hand because, again, the American system right now just rewards profitability. And so if an American drug company thought that we were going to bring in competing goods from another market, then that would actually help get the prices down.
Okay, and you're an advocate of a Medicare for All plan, but you've added a component of holistic health care under your version of Medicare for All. How would that work?
So I'm Asian, many of you might have noticed. And there's a whole heritage of different holistic medicines and approaches to health. And different things work for different people. When my wife gave birth, she had a hard time feeling healthy again, and she saw an acupuncturist, and that was immensely helpful. My mother, who's newly retired, is an artist now. She's seen an herbalist, and that's very helpful. And so our insurance and our healthcare program should cover different types of holistic treatments that people find constructive and helpful and beneficial, because many of these treatments have proven effects for at least some sets of people. And instead of having one standard or one size fits all, we should let Americans decide what works for them in terms of their own health and well-being.
But those programs exist outside of FDA approval process. They would not need any kind of FDA approval or proof of their efficacy before they could be covered.
Many of the treatments I just described, right now, they don't require FDA approval because just the nature, it's not a drug. Like you can't, so it's not that these holistic treatments take the place of traditional drugs. So most of the things we're talking about, those treatments, would not require FDA approval. That's correct.
Let's turn to the universal basic income. You've said you want it to be a Social Security-like benefit. To be clear, will it ever replace Social Security for older Americans?
It would not. Social Security is here to stay. This is money that you put away. Someone described it as a forced annuity. Essentially, you didn't make a choice when you were working to pay it. You probably resented it. But now you don't resent it. Now you're like, oh, yeah. Like, I did that for... And my parents did the same thing. They paid it for decades. And so there's Social Security. But we all know that Social Security is not enough to ensure an adequate retirement. Or right now, the average Social Security benefit is about $1,470. And can you imagine trying to meet all of your needs on $1,470 a month? That, unfortunately, is the situation that more and more Americans find themselves in. I was looking at how Social Security is actually 90% of the income of many seniors today. And so there's Social Security, which you paid into and you deserve it, and it's your money. And then there's the Freedom Dividend, this $1,000 a month, that is on top of that. That is your right as an owner and shareholder of this country.
Do you have other ideas for helping Americans save for retirement in a government-run system whereby an employee and an employer contribute, and that fund travels wherever the employee may land in terms of his work life, his or her work life?
It's been demonstrated that if you make it easier for employees to save, they save more. And by that, what you mean is if you have an opt-out as opposed to an opt-in, then the savings rate goes up. My father was part of the last generation of people that actually got something called a pension. You guys remember pensions? He worked at IBM, and he was like the last year, and then they kicked everyone off the pension the next year. They said, hey, you remember that pension? We're now going to port it into your own personal account. It'll be great. But we all know that the pension was a much better deal than the new accounts that employees got. So if we shift the default, essentially, to make it so that you save more instead of saving less, and then you get the cost down, then you can increase Americans' ability to save. You also need to teach financial literacy at the K through 12 level. I have an economics degree from my university, and even that actually is not the same thing as financial literacy. You know what I'm talking about. You're laughing because you might have studied economics too. But the level of financial literacy in this country is contributing to the lower retirement savings. Because if you say, look, there's compound interest, if you save $100 today, that might not seem like a lot, but if you come back in 20 years, it could actually add up over time. Most young people do not understand this, and so we need to help them understand it at the high school level. One thing I've found is that financial literacy is unteachable unless someone has money. You know what I mean? Like if you try and teach someone financial literacy and time value of money and compound interest and all that, totally just goes right in one ear out the other until they have a couple bucks. And then if you force them to invest a little bit of that, then all of a sudden all of those financial literacy principles become much more concrete. So my plan would put $1,000 a month in the hands of every American at age 18, and then you teach them financial literacy leading up. Do you think they'll pay attention to that class then? Yeah, and then that would ease the retirement savings crisis over time.
Congressman O'Rourke was just out here and said that universal basic income is a bad idea, that it's going to cost trillions, and that what we really should do instead is focus on a living minimum wage. What's your response?
Well, one of my issues with, I'm for a higher minimum wage. No American should be working and be poor. But a higher minimum wage does not help people like my wife, who's at home with our 2 young boys, one of whom is autistic. I mean, what does a higher minimum wage do for her? What does a higher minimum wage do for any of the caregivers or people who are spending time ministering to their loved ones? Here in Iowa, I'm giving a freedom dividend personally to a guy named Kyle Christensen, who's at home with his ailing mom, who's recovering from cancer. And so I would think that what Kyle's doing is some of the most important work being done in our society that would never be recognized by something like a higher minimum wage. We need to think much bigger about what work is and what value is in our society. And I would suggest that to people who are trying to retire, a higher minimum wage does not do that much for you either, unless you're in a circumstance where you have to go back to work.
Your previous career, among other things, was in technology. What technology do you envision to make life simpler for seniors in the future? And is there a government role in making these technologies accessible and affordable?
I think the biggest missed opportunity in terms of technology's improvement of your lives is in the healthcare space. And by this, what I mean is that many of you are in areas, particularly if you're in rural areas, where you have a hard time accessing the physicians and specialists that you need because there's a real shortage of those specialists in various parts of the country. Now, we can improve that with telemedicine, with different technologies. One of the issues is that there's a medical lobby that has actually tried to restrict those innovations. If you reflect on this for a moment, why does the United States of America have a doctor shortage? It's not that there's a shortage of young people who want to be doctors. I guarantee you that. It's because they limit the supply. They limit the supply of doctors. They limit the supply of doctors in particular states through various requirements. And then if you're a doctor and you graduate, you have $200,000 in debt. The last thing you want to do is become a family doctor in a rural area because that's going to make it harder for you to pay. You see how it all fits together? So the biggest innovation we can have that's going to help is by getting people access to health care where they are, so they don't have to drive 70 miles to see the doctor or specialist they're looking for, and bring that medical expertise to them. And it is possible, if we lighten up some of the barriers and restrictions that are in place and make telemedicine. I just met with a doctor who's at the frontier of this, and he's licensed in all 50 states, and he says there is so much more we can do if we lighten the artificial restrictions on doctors being able to access patients where they are.
Telemedicine would not be possible in parts of Iowa because they don't have internet access.
And isn't that the problem? So one of the things I'm championing in my campaign for president is that broadband should be a universal right of citizenship here in the United States. And there's a way to make that happen in rural areas. Right now, again, it's all about the almighty dollar in this country. So the reason why there's not broadband in rural areas is because the companies have done the math and they said it's not profitable for me to invest in actually laying the pipe. So what the government has to do is say, look, we will subsidize that pipe laying and then let you have the profits. And then all of a sudden, like that, we can get broadband access up to 99.8, 99.9%. It's just it won't happen if the government doesn't step in and make it worth the company's while. And this is something I would love to do as president, because there's no reason why we can't get high-speed internet to every part of this country.
And looking at your
Go ahead, Kay.
In looking at your campaign website, you have a section on housing, but it mainly focuses on zoning, which is an issue in larger cities. There are many rural Americans who would like to live in more accessible housing or even move to an assisted living facility. They just can't afford it. How do you solve that problem?
Well, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this freedom dividend is that this $12,000 a year in your hands would then end up making it easier for you to access the sort of housing you want, the assisted living facilities you want. It builds an economy that's built around our needs and values. And there's no better way to do it than just by putting the money into your hands. I've been working as an entrepreneur and business person. I've run a nonprofit for the last 7 years, and I now understand how the capital flows work. We are losing in this country at an epic scale. Like the humans, the citizens of this country, we are being shut out of our own country. It's madness. And the only way back in is by putting the money into our hands and taking advantage of the fact that in this country, if you have the financial resources, then the market will come serve you, that we can actually start solving our own problems. But this is the only way, is just by putting the economic power back into our hands.
Should the Americans with Disabilities Act be updated to ensure technology is accessible? There is some accessibility standards for things like smartphone apps, but there's a lot more applications for people who might be sight impaired or hearing impaired, and they don't have equal access in our society.
Yes, we should update the ADA to improve access to various technology applications. And this is something that the tech industry is very much short-sighted on.
Prescription drugs, let's return to that. Should cannabis be a prescription drug that you can pick up at the local pharmacy, or should we maintain the system whereby your access to it depends on the state in which you live?
I am for the removal of cannabis and marijuana from the federal controlled substance list. We should regulate it, but it should not be criminal and should not be state by state. It should be legal in all 50 states.
So when you say regulate it, what do you mean? The quality of the cannabis?
Well, that's one of the benefits of bringing it in from the shadows is you can actually stipulate quality standards. And when I say regulate, cigarettes are legal in this country, but you can't advertise to kids. You can't sell it on school grounds. Marijuana is not a cure-all, and it's not completely benign, but it is, in my mind, a superior pain relief approach to many of the other things that are legal in this country that we're dispensing, such as many addictive opiates that unfortunately have now become a massive plague in many communities. So the treatment of marijuana, it shouldn't be that like everyone can do what they want, but it should be legal in all 50 states.
You've worked in an industry with, I think, a remarkably young workforce, overwhelmingly young workforce. Have you ever encountered concerns about age discrimination in your industry? And in general, what should be done to make sure that people of all ages have access to the workforce?
I believe that age discrimination is a reality in most industries. We can put a law on the books, but the truth is that they can figure out how old you are in any of a million ways. They can certainly figure out how old you are when you come in and meet with them. And they might not say, hey, I'm not going to hire you because you're too old, because that would be pretty dumb and dense, and they know it's illegal. But then you don't get called back, and you're left to wonder why. And your age often has something to do with it. That's certainly true in technology, and it's true in many, many other industries. So we need to enforce the laws on the books to try and protect workers at every generation, every experience level. But we also have to try to build an economy that revolves around something other than the almighty dollar and capital efficiency. And what do I mean by this? So we have record high GDP right now. We also have record high stress levels, anxiety, financial insecurity, suicides, depression, drug overdoses, mental health crisis. These things are all true. And the reason they're true is that the economic indicators are actually completely off base and misaligned with how we're doing at this point. And one of the examples I use is that when my friends succeed in inventing cars and trucks that drive themselves, what will that mean for GDP? It's going to be great. What's that going to mean for the 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck for a living? It's going to be terrible. And so we have to align these two things as quickly as possible, and this will make it possible for us to do work that actually improves our own well-being. Because right now, our well-being and capital efficiency are in conflict. And old people who are seeking jobs that, in certain industries are getting caught in the crossfire, because then the company is like, hey, my job is to serve the bottom line, and I'm just going to assume that you're not going to be as helpful in that mission, and so I'm going to discriminate against you. So what we have to do is we have to change the bottom line of the organizations, and we have to change the bottom line of our society. We have to make it so that there's a human bottom line for our economy. We have to make it so that we measure our economy not in this GDP number that's going to lead us off a cliff, but in our health, our life expectancy, our mental health, how our kids are doing, how strong our communities are. If you make those the measurements of the economy, then I'm going to suggest that people who have decades of experience will become invaluable in so many of these settings. We can't set up a race that we're all going to lose. And this is not a matter of age, this is a matter of humanity. Your children, you're worried about them. How many of you all are parents like I am? How many of you are concerned that they're going to inherit a future that is not as bright as even the life that you'd experience? Like virtually all of us. I am too. That's why I'm running for president. And why are we all so concerned? Because we see that this economy is not designed for them to succeed. We see that this economy is not designed for them to have families and buy homes and start businesses and settle where they live. Instead, there's this message that if you want to have a good life, you can only live in, a big city or something like this. You have to try and pursue a certain sort of life. A study just came out today that said people in big cities are having fewer kids. And is that really the life that we want to prescribe for our country and our kids? So we have to rewrite the rules of our economy from the top down. This is why I'm running for president, to create a human-centered economy in the 21st century. Because it's not an age thing. I'm fairly technologically savvy, and I'm freaked out at the stuff they're inventing. You know what I mean? I was an unhappy corporate lawyer for 5 months, and I can guarantee you they can automate that job. So stuff's coming down the pike that would have been unimaginable a decade ago, and it is up to us to galvanize energy around a vision for a different kind of economy and make it real as fast as possible.
I think this may be the last question, and it's a very detailed question. There are many older Americans who get their health care from the VA system. Should VA hospitals and clinics be converted into specialty areas, and then veterans be allowed to get their general care close to home?
I talk to veterans about this, and they say that it's an issue that they can only seek certain sorts of treatment in the VA, and then they get pushed to another facility or part of the system. And then someone said they had to drive 100 miles. In order to make that happen, we need to redouble the resources that we put into the VA and make it so that you don't have to drive 100 miles, you don't have to go to 5 different facilities for your treatment. We are our veterans better than that. And we have the resources. The biggest lie in America right now is we do not have the money. Just remember that. Do you all remember voting for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street? I don't remember that because none of us voted for it. Do you remember anyone looking around at that point saying, where's the money, where's the money? No, when they needed the money, we found the $4 trillion. No, it's time for us. It's time for the American people to enjoy the benefits of all the progress we made over the last number of years, and that includes veterans, first and foremost.
Thanks for answering our questions. We'd just like to give you 30 seconds to wrap up.
Oh, sure thing. Thank you for this opportunity. As you've probably gathered, I'm not a career politician. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver, and I'm running for president to solve the biggest problem that's facing America today that's hand in hand with climate change. It's that our economy is being transformed in a way that is pushing more and more people to the side. And unfortunately in America, people blame themselves, but it is not our fault. It's actually that our economy is progressing to a point that's going to make it harder and harder for our children, for ourselves to find paths forward. So we need to wake up to this reality, this set of challenges, and evolve and advance as fast as possible. Donald Trump got some of our problems right, but his approaches were all wrong. And the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.